Welcome to the February 1st edition of This Week in South Carolina in Session. I'm Gavin Jackson outside the Statehouse here in Columbia. Well, it was another quick Thursday here that wrapped up the fourth week of the legislative session. A lot of activity happened outside of the Senate and House chambers, which were briefly in session today, passing a couple of perfunctory measures. Actually, the biggest activity we saw was over in the Senate Corrections and Penology Committee, which took up a bill dealing with execution methods that actually passed out of the committee, and then another bill dealing with shield law that also passed out of the committee. We have some more details about that later. And also there was a joint committee known as a conference committee of 3 Senate and 3 House lawmakers that met today to deal with the governor and lieutenant governor joint ticket bill. It's been a surprisingly contentious bill, and there's still a lot more that needs to be done on it, but we got some more comments on what's happening exactly, and we'll catch you up on that too as well. And we caught up with the Governor Henry McMaster today, to talk about the Super Bowl. No, not exactly about who's playing in the Super Bowl, but what he wants people to do this Super Bowl Sunday. Let's get right into it. Members of the Senate Corrections and Penology Committee made slight changes to 2 execution-related bills today. One makes the electric chair the default method of execution, since the state hasn't been able to obtain the drugs necessary for lethal injection. The state hasn't performed an execution for more than 5 years due to the problem of companies not providing the drugs. But that could change if a shield bill the committee approved makes it to the governor's desk. The bill would provide anonymity to pharmaceutical companies that provide the state with lethal drugs.
Senate Bill 872 gets to the issue that's been in the press some recently over the last several months about the department not being able to comply with the law to carry forth a death sentence if they're given the order by the Supreme Court to do that. And just as a little bit of background, so South Carolina, of course, has capital punishment, at least on paper, but it sets up that there are 2 methods of execution. There are 2 methods of execution outlined in the law. Those 2 methods are lethal injection and electrocution. Those are the only 2 methods that we can use in South Carolina, the only 2 methods that the department can use, because those are the only 2 that are set out in law. And the law specifically says that the inmate, the person who has the death sentence, has the option to elect which of those 2 methods that he chooses. He has to make that election, I think, within 14 days of the execution date. Right now, we're in a situation where pretty much everybody elects lethal injection when they're given that option. If they don't elect, the default is lethal injection. And of course, the problem is that right now the department can't buy the drugs. So they can't carry out a lethal injection execution because they don't have the approved cocktail in order to do that.
So I think the shield law goes to protect the manufacturers. The default law is if we still cannot obtain it. The shield law is not a cure-all, because the companies could still say, even though you have a shield law, we don't want to sell it to you.
And lawmakers are still hashing out the details of Bill S-107, which deals with the governor and lieutenant governor running on the same ticket. Now, you might remember that we talked about this yesterday, wherein that voters approved this constitutional amendment in 2012, but Senate and House lawmakers still haven't hammered out the differences needed to put that law into place. We're talking about how much money a joint ticket can raise, what the exact duties of the lieutenant governor will become, and also when a gubernatorial candidate can name their running mate. Is it before or after the primary? Let's get some insight here. It became contentious at the end of the session last year when House lawmakers amended the Senate bill to study the salaries of judges and other constitutional officers. The move has led to the current showdown, and lawmakers said they still need more time to hammer out some of the differences.
I'm getting calls from solicitors, from public defenders, from masters in equities, from magistrates, because all about pay. This bill's about the lieutenant governor and governor running on a ticket, implementing the constitutional amendment. And the only thing that's consuming all of our time is calls from folks who want a pay raise, concerned they're not going to be involved in a pay raise, that don't have anything to do with the governor, lieutenant governor running as a ticket. That's what the people voted on, and that's what this bill is about implementing. And it's always been about implementing nothing but that, including the pay raise part, because the lieutenant governor's job description has changed. By law, it has changed. It's no longer simply a part-time position.
The lieutenant governor was a constitutional officer and will be a constitutional officer by the election, still there. So you're going to treat one constitutional officer different from the remainders. And that's what was repugnant to me about the Senate version of the bill.
My indication, in having talked to other members of our caucus, I think there is support for trying to provide some pay increases for those individuals. It will not be uncontested, and there will be people who oppose it, but I do think that I do think that we can move it.
And Governor Henry McMaster said that he supports the House bill that got approval this week that will get rid of the nuclear premium. We're talking about $27 a month that SC&G ratepayers continue to pay for the failed VC Summer nuclear power plant expansion project. He said he'll sign that bill, but it's up to the Senate to see what they'll do with it now that it's in their hands. Also, we talked to the governor about his proclamation that he issued earlier this week, in which he's urging South Carolinians, wherever they are this Super Bowl Sunday, to stand during the national anthem. This harkens back to player protests in the NFL while players protested police brutality by taking a knee during the national anthem. Let's get his opinion on this right now.
I think we have to keep on working. I think that the people who paid those fees, extra fees on their bill, had no choice. These power companies are monopolies. They're regulated. People have no choice but to pay the bill or to get the power cut off. That fee is on top of that. They had no choice to choose that. They didn't choose any of that. It's not their fault. They need to get their money back. Our state has a tremendous military tradition, and to not stand for the flag, which represents the country, which represents freedom, and represents the men and women and families who have sacrificed and given their lives to make this country free, is not the right thing to do. I think it's very simple. Standing for the national anthem transcends whatever the activity is, whatever the location is around the world. When that national anthem is played, people should stand.
And the governor didn't tell us who he'd be rooting for this Super Bowl Sunday, since Carolinians are playing on both the Eagles and the Patriots teams. And with that wraps up our fourth week of legislative coverage here at the Statehouse in Columbia. Now, there will be some activity next week in the House and the Senate as we progress into the second week of February. And we'll be looking at possibly a bill in the House that would prohibit municipalities, cities, and towns across the state from implementing plastic bag bans. Several have done so, but there's a bill that would prevent that from happening. So keep an eye out for that. And as we always say, our SCTV's legislative coverage does not stop here. Tune in tomorrow night at 7:30 to watch This Week in South Carolina with Charles Bierbauer. Also, listen to South Carolina Public Radio on Fridays for Statehouse Week. And tune in to the South Carolina Lead podcast, in which I host reporters and we talk about several issues that happened throughout the state. And join me every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on our Facebook, our SCTV's Facebook, our YouTube page, and my Twitter account at Gavin Jackson for live video recaps every day at 7 p.m. I'm Gavin Jackson outside the Statehouse in Columbia.